So let's learn how to customize the out-of-the-box orchestration setup script. So in order to have the setup itself and make sure that it's the correct one for my system, I'm going to download it from CloudShell. So in CloudShell, in the global domain, here is my setup script, Default Sandbox Setup 3.0. You can click the Scripts More Actions button and download. Let's save it again to my temp folder and extract it. Let's open it in PyCharm. It'll be more convenient. You can see the setup is relatively simple. It only has 3 files. So the first file is the version text file. It's pretty self-explanatory. It's just the number of the version. Second file is the requirements file, which declares the Python packages that are required by the script. As you can see, there's only one package here, which is the CloudShell Orchestration Core. By the way, when you require a package, it also automatically installs all the dependencies of that package. Specifically, in the case of this package, it will also install the CloudShell API. This is why you don't need to state that you also need the CloudShell Automation API separately, but as part of the dependencies for this package. And of course, we have the main file, which is the entry point to the script in case you have more than one file in the script. The basic setup script is only 5 lines. All it does is import this specific package, then registers the default workflow and runs it. Now what if we want to intervene here and add some commands to the default workflow? The way this works is that you need to have some functions, and then you can add those functions to different phases in the workflow. So let's define a custom preparation function. The function you want to add to the orchestration has to receive only 2 parameters. For ease of use, we're going to use the sandbox and component parameters. And in order to get the autocomplete, we'll instantiate the parameter the same as the global scope using the sandbox object. We're going to use the API to write to the console. And just to have some delay, let's also add a few seconds delay after we print this. So it's going to use the API to print this message, hello from preparation step, and then it will wait for 5 seconds. This is what this function does. Let's make one function for each of the other steps. Provisioning, connectivity, and configuration. Now, how do we get the default sandbox workflow to actually run this function? This is incredibly simple. All we need to do is sandbox.workflow. And we have functions here that will allow us to add the custom functions to the different steps. So let's do add to preparation, and we need to give it the name of the function, custom preparation. And we can do the same for the others. We'll call this custom provisioning, custom connectivity, and custom configuration. By default, when I put in a function name, Python wants to call the function, but we're not calling the function. We're simply passing the function as a parameter. That's it. That's the only changes I wanted to make to my script, to print a different message at each step. All of these extra spaces here are for convenience, so it's easy to read. So let's save the script, back it up into a zip file, then go back to our CloudShell and drop it in. We'll define this script as a setup script and give it version 1.0, for example. And also a description, custom setup script with extra prints. Now all we need to do is associate the script with a blueprint, and we can reserve the blueprint and see the script run. So let's create a new blueprint. We'll call it Blueprint with Custom Setup. Going to the blueprint properties. Here, in the script association section, you will need to first delete the association with the default setup script and add our custom setup script. Update the blueprint and reserve to see it in action. Of course, we will open the output menu to see the progress of the script. Because CloudShell needs to create a new virtual environment for the script, it will take a couple of seconds to prepare the virtual environment. We already got a hello from the preparation step, provisioning, connectivity, and configuration. I'll reiterate once more that these are just simple prints. However, this demonstrates the ability to inject any Python code that you want into any of those steps. And there's actually an additional option to have the code execute at the end of the step. So there's onConfiguration ended, onConnectivity ended, onPreparation ended, and onProvisioning ended. These functions follow the same concept, but they wait for the default out-of-the-box step to complete before actually running the function. One last thing that I want to mention is that you can also disable the default steps. It's part of this line here, Default Setup Workflow Register. Here I can control which steps I want to disable. Note that the preparation step cannot be disabled, but let's disable the other three. So enable provisioning false, enable connectivity false, and enable configuration false. Basically, what will happen now is that instead of running the default flow together with our functions, it will only run our functions without the defaults. To see that in action, let's repackage the script and update it on CloudShell. This is a good opportunity to show that if I update the setup script, since it's already associated with this blueprint, if we rerun the setup, it will rerun with the updated version. So when developing a script, for example, you could have a sandbox running and keep updating the scripts it's using to check your latest script modifications. Let's return to the sandbox, clear the prints, and rerun the setup. So we should see the preparation step running, but the rest of our functions will run after that, without the default steps. Here's preparation, provisioning, connectivity, and configuration. You see this time without the other prints from the default workflow. So you see that we can not only intervene in the middle of the default workflow or add to it at the end, but also replace it altogether. The obvious question would be, why is this needed? So an example for this would be for the configuration step. If you don't want to configure all of your applications at the same time, say there's some dependency logic. For example, you first need to configure the web server before you configure the database server, or something like that. Or the other way around, you first need to configure the database server and then configure the web server. If you disable the default configuration step, you can change the configuration parameters, application by application, and then run the configuration of the applications in a specific order that fits your logic. This will give you the capability of having your configuration be tiered and not done all at once. This concludes our demo on how to customize a default orchestration script.